Such an awesome class. You probably know that already, but if you don't, from someone who has taught his class a time or two, taught a class a time or two, I just, am always amazed by his classes, and that makes filling in for him even more challenging, because, he does such a good class. And when he called this week and said, "Hey, would you be willing to fill in?" I said, "Well, so what are we teaching? Where are you going?" And he told me about his class, and I realized that third lesson was going to be something like a pivotal class. And I said, "Look, no one's going to tell that story the way you'll tell that story, and so I really don't think I should try. So why don't we do this? We'll save that class for you so that everyone can appreciate the implications and just the beauty of the things that Dale wants to share. Instead of me doing it at 70%, let's let him do it at 100%. And what I'll do is I'll just talk a little bit about the overall context of the upper room. So kind of just, flesh out a little bit about what's going on there, because what's the context is really essential to our understanding and I believe practice of the Lord's Supper. And so instead of doing an okay job with what Dale had to say, let's let Dale, go out there and really kill it next week. But today I just want to start with a simple question, maybe a couple comments from you regarding the Lord's Supper and what makes it meaningful to you. Who would like to share a specific facet of the Lord's Supper that makes it maybe more meaningful to you or really stands out in your mind? Anyone? Because by the way, we're in John chapter 13. We're going to read it in just a minute, read a few verses there. But what makes the Lord's Supper so meaningful to you? Oh, yes, ma'am.
I'm going to jump in. It may sound silly, but sometimes you have, I concentrate on the cup and the flavor. Sometimes I think it's bittersweet, and that really brings home to me the sacrifice of Christ, because it was a bittersweet kind of sacrifice.
Wow, that's awesome. In case you didn't hear back over there, she was saying that sometimes she reflects a little bit on the flavor of the Lord's Supper, specifically the cup, because, it's kind of bittersweet. And she says, and isn't that kind of the way the Lord's death is for us? It's a little bit bittersweet, so, to see, how we got here, what it means, by what means God used is very bitter, but when you realize what it really reflects in regard to God's love and concern for us, it's really sweet. Maybe someone else has an idea, something that kind of makes, yes, ma'am.
I like the fact that we're all sharing together.
Okay.
It's a vertical and a horizontal.
Okay. Man, she got mine. All right. We've been living together too long, I think, right? But, the fact that, the Lord's Supper is as much horizontal, something that is shared, as it is vertical. A lot of times we focus on the vertical, when the truth is, what is it in Corinthians? Paul says, is not the cup that we share a sharing of the body, a communion of the body? And of course, the answer is yes. It's not just vertical; it's very horizontal as we do this together in memory of Him. So, context. Oh, someone else had a. Oh, yes, ma'am.
My dad used to say, and it kind of goes along with what Cheryl said, he liked to put the bread on his tongue and just hold it there for a while and reflect on the Lord's body and what it went through.
keeping our perseverance in faith ultimately comes back to the blood of Christ shed for us. We have one more. Very good. In fact, that's going to be our reading here in just a moment. He was saying that, Christ's life was not taken from him, but it was yielded by him. Okay, we got one more. Oh, blame me. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
And it was never broken. He was a perfect sacrifice. The Old Testament, if you want to understand that, is very detailed, and God gets very upset when you get a blemished.
Mm-hmm.
In Malachi really gets after him for that, giving lame animals. Christ was the perfect sacrifice, so there was nothing broken about his body.
Okay. All right. I'm going to cut it off there, okay? Because I think we could go on here for a while, because there's so many different facets. And I appreciate the brother's comment that we often speak of the Lord's body being broken, when in fact it was not, because he was that perfect sacrifice. And so, again, what I want to deal with today is context, okay? What ultimately happens in the upper room, to me, is so powerful and far-reaching that it frankly deserves the focus Dale is providing in considering this course and the idea of lessons from the upper room. Yet to understand its message, we have to understand all the forces at play and all that led to the moment and what had happened prior to the Lord's Supper, because all of these things are kind of bubbling right under the surface. Okay, so this is the context. What's happened before? What are these guys thinking? Where is their mind as they come together to celebrate the Lord's Supper? And so, I would suggest that, with all these things brewing, bubbling right under the surface, this is likely the reason Jesus chose to do what he did, attempting one last time to press upon his closest companions the nature of the kingdom and the role they were to fulfill in it. And so, let's review here in John chapter 13 what John said about what Jesus knew going into this evening. I think it's very powerful. Chapter 13. It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew. Here's what Jesus knew going into that evening. Knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Number 2, having loved his own who were in this world, he now